Hey. Okay. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Al Bavon, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to the Clinton School of Public Service as we recognize and celebrate the history and research of the Vital Voices Global Partnership. The Clinton School's work with Vital Voices began in 2011 when then Dean Skip Rutherford asked me to work with a team that traveled to Ghana to work on an initiative to develop and grow small businesses run by women. I didn't know it then, but this trip marked the beginning of one of the most important partnerships for the Clinton School. More than a decade later, the Clinton School and Vital Voices have partnered to bring more than a dozen students to work in Washington, D.C. as McLarty scholars. Each student has enjoyed a unique experience while supporting the important work being done to promote women's engagement and entrepreneurship around the world. The students' work has culminated with research that will help countries around the world recognize and bring forward women across the spectrum of government, civic, and business leadership. The research project sought to develop measurement tools by which entities within a given ecosystem could better evaluate local governance and programming and how that enhanced or impeded women's leadership development. Today, we'll learn more about our research from the students who helped lead it, as well as stories behind the partnership between the Clinton School and Vital Voices. Now, please help me welcome Vital Voices CEO Alyse Nelson, former McLarty scholars Ophelia Akoto, and Rodrigo Santos Legaspi, and Dean Victoria DeFrancesco Soto.
Good afternoon. This makes me so happy. I've been looking forward to this gathering for a very long time. As Dr. Bravon said, the Clinton School and Vital Voices has been working together for over a decade. It started off with one student, and there was 2 students a year, and then there was 3 students one year, and then 4 students another. And what we were seeing was this momentum keep growing in terms of these 2 like-minded institutions about affecting positive social change, whether it's here in Arkansas or across the world come together. And before we dig in, I want to shout out the trailblazers of this partnership, Mrs. Donna McLarty and Dean Emeritus Skip Rutherford. If you could please join me. So you both had the vision of what the interaction of this relationship could be. And a decade later, we're seeing this here. And what we are celebrating, one of the things we're celebrating, in addition to the 10-year, is that the McLarty scholars, together with Vital Voices, recently published in a peer-reviewed journal, a very well-respected peer-reviewed journal, research that really was the culmination of the last several years of work. And it's kind of a long title. Let me see here. All right, it's, unless you guys have it memorized, it is Evaluating a Woman's Leadership Journey and Impact by Adapting Contribution, Mapping, and Analysis Tools. I know that sounds a little boring for the non-academics here, but this is freaking awesome. Like, what this paper did is it really established the fact that leadership is not something that is linear, but really highlighted this as messy. And when we're talking about women, and when we're talking about women across the globe, it's going to be even messier. And so let's understand the real model and not some idealized form of it. So really this article established that. And in addition to measuring it, I'm looking at Dr. Alba Vaughn, who just got done teaching program evaluation, literally 10 minutes ago, and is publishing a book on program evaluation. And a program is only good as it is replicated. And if we don't have the measurement and the tools to then amplify the work, then we're stopping short. And so what this journal article did, and I invite you all to read it, it's available online, we'll be sending out the links to that, is honing in how you build power among women across the world, and then how you measure it and how you replicate that. So that's my abstract of the article. I will stop there, I promise. What I want to do today is I want to do a discussion of the past, the present, and the future of the Vital Voices Clinton School of Public Service work. Because I think that the context is really important to understand how Vital Voices developed, and then where the Clinton School came in. And then there have been some very exciting developments with Alyse and Vital Voices, with Rodrigo and Ophelia, Clinton School alum, taking place recently. And then I want to have a conversation about the future, because I think this is really where so much of the exciting work is. And I'm looking at our current students, and I'm looking at students who will be starting in the fall, what this means for you and what this means for impact work going forward. So with that, I want to start with you, Alyse. And for those who may not be familiar with the historical context of Vital Voices, if you can give us kind of the big picture.
Sure. Well, it's shocking to be here in Little Rock and people not know about Vital Voices, because the matriarch of it all is here, Donna McLarty. But no, I'm always happy to give that broader context. And let me just say, Vicki, how wonderful it is to be here with the scholars and celebrating this 10 years. I think sometimes we are so focused on doing, and then all of a sudden you look up, you see the impact, but it's so good to celebrate it and call out that it has been more than 10 years. And now we have this incredible product, which for us gives us incredible legitimacy in this space, because as you say, investing in leaders is messy. So Vital Voices started on the heels of the UN Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing, China. Let's take us back to 1995. Hillary Clinton gives that famous speech, "Women's rights are human rights," when actually nobody wanted her to go to that conference. But she went. Stephanie knows well. She went, and that is probably one of the most historic landmark speeches of the women's rights world, if not one of the most, famous speeches in the world. And really coming back, wanting to be sure that it wasn't just rhetoric, really began working with Milan Revere, the chief of staff, to really think about how could she use her power not just to elevate women's voices in the United States, but actually around the globe. And Vital Voices really was born out of that. It started as a US government conference. It was supposed to be a one-off conference, but guess what? Women leaders around the world had other ideas. And that is the beautiful thing, is that Vital Voices was created for and because of women around the globe. Women who were not connected, because FYI, we started in 1997 and Google was founded in 1998. So you could not Google, who are the other women leaders working on gender-based violence, right? You could not find these people. Social media did not exist. And so it really was about bringing women together. We worked really closely with our embassies around the world. Donna and Mac were deeply engaged in the Vital Voices Next Summit that happened in Latin America, utilizing all their extraordinary contacts, working with our embassies and partners to find these women leaders, right? You had to go out to the community to find who are these women who are on the front lines of change, but who aren't recognized and don't see themselves as leaders. Don't see themselves as leaders because the model of leadership in their community looked very different. It had a man's face. It was about being born into it. It was about title, position, money, corner office. It was about, we had to convince these women, no, you are the leader in your community. Oh, really? You know, and we still do that to this day. So fast forward, because, you know, I could go on and on. We became a nonprofit because Donna and I were there at the table when we woke up one morning, bringing together women leaders from around the world who'd gone back, started Vital Voices chapters and conferences, who would take this thing on to themselves. And they said, listen, we've written the mission statement overnight. This is women around the world. And we think Vital Voices needs to become a nonprofit. And of course, Donna McLarty and Mary Yerrick registered Vital Voices as a nonprofit. Mary's, you know, home address in Bethesda is our first address. This is how things start, even when you've got backing of Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright. But really, it was a movement from the beginning, a movement driven by women leaders who wanted desperately to connect with others. And today, we've directly invested in more than 20,000 women leaders across 185 countries. We are very different than just a gathering or conferences, because guess what? The world has changed. What women need has changed. Today, we have an investment model. And through that investment model, we invest in women's leadership through training, through mentorship, through creating a network of their peers, because that's critical to know, oh, there's a woman in another country who's doing the same thing as I am, through financial support. We also know that's critical, right? Through visibility and credibility, awards, press, you know, giving them that, like, yeah, you know, maybe I'm not recognized in my country, but I'm recognized globally, and that's important. And then finally, one of the things that we began to realize is that increasingly, not only is our world in crisis, but women leaders are finding themselves, their voices being basically shut down, whether it's online or in person, more threats against them. And I want to call out Abby. Abby is from our crisis response team. She's here, grew up in Little Rock, the connections. We have actually a couple people on staff who grew up in Little Rock. Amazing. But anyway, we developed that model really to support women leaders over time. We think of ourselves as venture catalysts. We find extraordinary leaders who are taking on the world's greatest challenges, from climate change to gender-based violence to economic inequities. And we invest in them. This is a very different model than your traditional development, right? Because we go into communities and we don't say, here are the 17 problems and here are the solutions. We find the leaders who are dealing with those problems, who understand the cultural surrounds, and we invest in them. And it's not a one-off, it's long-term. But how do you measure that? How do you prove it's effective? We knew, but now I want to turn back to these guys because they really helped us crack that nut.
We serve, we do not steer. And I think that is one of the strongest common denominators in that is our calling, that is our why. And we talk a lot about what is your why at the Clinton School. And so Ophelia and Rodrigo, I want to talk a little bit about your journey to the Clinton School, then to working with Vital Voices. And let me just note here that both Ophelia and Rodrigo started during the thick of COVID. Was it 2020? Was it fall of 2020? Okay. So you ran toward the burning building. You said, you know what? I'm going to keep going. I want to keep developing a little bit about that. And also, you know, under the microscope of COVID-19, the pressing need to serve women's issues and the greater global good came under pressure. So, Rodrigo, let me start with you.
Well, first of all, Dean, thank you so much for having us. I'm glad to be back in Arkansas. And of course, I have to acknowledge Donna and Dean Rutherford, because they are the ones who made this happen and gave students the opportunity, some of who are here, my fellow McLarty scholars, to accomplish this research. Very grateful for that. So, as you mentioned, we started at the Clinton School in August of 2020. I graduated, I'm originally from El Paso, Texas, graduated in May, and I was like, what am I gonna do next? Like, everything shut down. Fortunately, one of my professors at UTEP used to teach here at the Clinton School, Dr. Arvind Singhal, And he said, have you looked at the Clinton School program curriculum? You should consider it. I looked into it, started the application, missed the deadline, and then I was like, oh, well, I'll just wait until the next year. And then Alex Thomas sent me an email and was like, hey, we saw your application. We're wondering if you're still interested in joining the program. I was like, okay, fine, I'll take a shot. Long story short, one of the best decisions ever. Starting here at the Clinton School after the first year, which is the most rigorous part of the program, the opportunity to apply to the McLarty Fellowship came across, and we talked to fellow scholars, talked to Donna, to Dean Rutherford about this opportunity, and it was really in line into why I came to Clinton School. I grew up in a family where it's packed with women. If you look at a picture of my family, it's like 30 women, my dad, myself, and a couple of uncles and cousins, So I grew up learning about these issues, women's issues, and the importance of, why men should be allies of, this fight. And then going back to one of our fearless leaders, Hillary Clinton, when she was running for president the first time, she made a stop in my hometown. I was 12 years old, and I told my mom, can you take me to see Hillary speak? And she's like, why do you want to go see Hillary speak? I was like, well, I just want to kind of interested in politics and all that. So we went, and after that speech, I was like, wow, public service is the best way to go out and bring about positive change in your community. And that was life-changing thing to see from Secretary Clinton. And, then a couple of years later, I'm at the Clinton School. So it was very neat. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation and see what else we can accomplish from this project.
Ophelia.
It's a culmination of all your work that has brought us this far. So thank you all, and thank you all for being here too. I actually just remembered my journey to the Clinton School this morning when I was doing the alumni video. And I think I was 19 years when I came for a graduation right outside this building, and Bill Clinton was actually speaking at that graduation, and I got to take a picture with him. I still have that picture. And it was my cousin that was graduating actually. And so after the graduation, he brought me inside the building, and as I was just walking through the walls, I was like, maybe someday I'm going to come here. And then fast forward in 2020, I got accepted, and I came here. But I guess when I was coming, I didn't really know what service women's space in the labor force in Newport. And I think that was such a redefining moment in my life, because seeing how our research and our analysis contributed to more women being involved in the labor force in Newport, Arkansas was just so impactful to me. And I continue to carry that with me wherever I go. And so when the opportunity came to apply for the McLarty Fellowship, I remember talking to Dr. Bavon. I was like, I'm really interested because I think I found what I really want to do, that is to invest in women's issues. So I did the interview and everything, and I'm so glad that I actually was privileged to go to my as a McLarty scholar, and it has been such, I can't find the exact words to quantify my experience in the process. It's just priceless, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and Ophelia, she has continued on with her studies. She is now doing her PhD at Brandeis, and I know that is the passion that is driving you, women, I think especially in STEM education. And Ophelia, if you can talk a little bit about how your work with Vital Voices prepared you for this. And here, maybe even getting into the weeds a little bit about the methodology and the data work that you did that set you up for this next chapter.
Definitely. So as Dean rightly said, the title of the article is quite long, Evaluating a Woman's Leadership Journey and Impact Through Contribution Mapping and Analysis Tools. And the title in of itself tells you how impactful this work is. So we were trying to measure women's leadership, but this time we're not trying to take the traditional approach by looking at how men and women have parity in formal institutions. We want to stop and look at the turns, the twists, and the things that actually contribute to the women's leadership. Because if we always measure women's leadership in the traditional way, we neglect the influences, the decision-making processes, and the empowerment that these women actually faced and went through in their journey. And so with this research, we thought to do multiple things, but I'll touch on a few of them. So the first was to, of course, measure women's leadership, but we were measuring it in the light of the impact that Vital Voices has had on their leadership journeys. And so we took Vital Voices' theory of change model, which is in dimensions. And the first dimension, which seeks to bring the woman's vision to life. So in that, we ask questions about the resources and the mentors that Vital Voices provided to the women, to help them bring that vision to life. And for the second dimension of the theory of change, which is she shifts her culture, which we thought to ask questions about the impact that these women have had in their communities and how those impacts have shifted their culture. And I remember most of the women saying that they were able to give other women a voice, and that alone was enough for them. And I remember hearing that and feeling just so impacted by that. And the third dimension of the theory of change is that she is recognized as a global leader, in that we ask questions about how their experiences with Vital Voices has contributed to the awards that they have gotten, right? And we got so many comments. I know Rodrigo will speak to this. So many comments about how they just being part of the Vital Voices network has contributed to them being named as Nobel laureates and so many other impactful awards. And then finally, we asked them questions about the third dimension, which is she reinvests in her community, which is what I think Vital Voices stands for. Impacting women and then helping these women to also reinvest back into their communities. And in that, we got so many questions. I remember so many comments. I remember interviewing a woman from Uganda, and then she telling me how over the past 14 years, she has invested in the lives of girls, over 50,000 girls in her community. And being from Ghana, I thought that was so impactful. And I guess it just gave me a form of strength that I can also do it. And we did this through interviews. So that was our methodology. We interviewed these women on Zoom because it was during COVID. And we were still able to, collect such rich data to measure their leadership journeys. Yeah.
It is a virtuous cycle, right? Because it is changing communities, but then it spurs change across the globe. And I think that is the power of this work. That's the power of your research, that it then can be replicated. I want to pivot though slightly to the present or the near past. I know Vital Voices has been going through some exciting changes, both physically. You guys moved into this incredible new building in DC. And also in terms of the scope and focus of the work. So Alyse, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think we really pride ourselves in being a learning organization. And as I mentioned before, when we were founded, it was enough to bring women together because they didn't have the opportunity to connect online, et cetera. Over the years, we've continued to add various pieces. We've realized not only does investing financially support women leaders, but it gives them credibility because they got a grant from us to get grants from other people. Obviously, I talked about the crisis response team before. That isn't something we had in the beginning, but we began to realize we've been doing it all along off the side of our desk. When a woman in our network is in crisis, we respond. We support her. Malala Yousafzai, for example, when she was shot by the Taliban, one of the first calls that the family made was to Vital Voices. Somehow they found out about us. I went out and met with the family, and they said, all these people are raising money around Malala, and her name and her cause. But, she wants to start a foundation. And they're not, they're raising it for other organizations. They're not raising it for what she wants to do. And so we stepped in and we incubated the Malala Fund. And actually, one of our books at Vital Voices is she came back and dedicated, and we got a duplicate copy of her Nobel Peace Prize that she signed to us, because she said, I wasn't given this prize because I was shot and I recovered and because I spoke out. I was given this prize because I channeled that and I led my dream and I had voices behind me. Very few people know that story. And that's really been our model, is that we're standing behind some of the most extraordinary leaders. And that's by design, right? We didn't want people to think, oh, there's, a group of American women or women from other places around the world based in Washington, D.C. who were standing behind this young woman. It was very important. People saw her as the face and the leader. But to make that happen, it does really require that ongoing investment. And so I think one of the biggest shifts that we've seen is that we really recognized it can't be a one-off investment. When we would go out to corporations and we would, try and engage them in supporting our work, they would often say, oh, if we give you this money, we want you to reach 3,000 women. And we're like, well, actually, what we'd like to do is we would like to reach 30 women. But these are all women who are leaders in their community. We're going to invest very deeply in them over a long period of time. And we're going to show the impact. And what you're going to see at the end of this, in years to come, is they're going to reach hundreds, thousands, millions. It'll have a much greater impact. It's hard to convince people without the data, right? They're like, well, that sounds interesting, but what will that tell my shareholders tomorrow, right? And so I think, this research is extremely powerful. The other piece that I think, as you alluded to, is a couple of years ago, we began to realize that we needed a new space. Our lease was coming up. We were growing rapidly, and we could either continue to pay soaring rents, or we could look at making an investment and buying a piece of property. And as we began to further the idea, of course, with Donna and the other board members and supporters, we started to think about this as a global embassy for women. Because what we know is we do our work behind the scenes, and for good reason. Women work behind the scenes. No one often sees, what they're doing or what they're up to. People didn't know we were working across 185 countries. So it was very strategic to create this global embassy, historic building, 35,000 square feet, every single speck of it designed by women, women artisans, furniture by women. A lot of thought went into this. It's open today. Of course, the Clinton School has been there, done events there, and we certainly invite all of you to join us there. But it really is a place of permanence. It's on 16th Street. It's a place of power. And I think it's really presence. There are so few things in this world named after women. And we wanted to create a visible, powerful place where women could gather, but also a space that's named for women that would always remind people of the important power that women play, and a place where we could continue to be public. But the other thing I'll just say quickly, we wanted the way in which we ran this space to exemplify what we're trying to bring into the world. The greatest lesson I've learned at Vital Voices in my 27 years of leadership education by women all over the world, I'm a product of Vital Voices, 100%, is that women lead differently. And that difference that they bring, and certainly came out in the research, is desperately needed in the world today. They're cause-driven, they're collaborative, they're inclusive, they pay it forward, engaging others. They believe that power expands the moment it's shared, which is really important. But how could we, as we thought about operating this space, do the same? Take some of those lessons. And what we've done is we've opened up the space to other women's nonprofits, and we've offered them a space to meet, to hold events for free. So that has been very powerful because it's expanded our partnership, people who know about us. But it's also said when women get the opportunity, when women get a space, we share it. We understand that power expands the moment it's shared. And again, I learned that from the women leaders. And I will say, we never would have believed we could ever buy a building, totally renovate it, and all that goes into that. If I wasn't fueled every day and given my courage pill by women leaders at work, women like the woman from Uganda. I'd love to know who that is exactly. I'm like, is it this woman? Is it Helen? Is it, who is it? Because they give us the courage to think big and bold and say, we've got to do it. If we don't push the envelope, nothing will happen.
Let me first say this space is spectacular. If you have not visited it, you must visit it. And in terms of reflecting what you're saying about providing a space for women, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the work of the Women's Foundation of Arkansas. We have Ms. Anna Beth Gorman with us here today. And I think it's the beauty of thinking and acting locally and globally. All of us together are a network of impact. And for this is why our partnership has been so powerful, and the ability to bring in a global lens, because the Clinton School, sometimes people scratch their head. They think, well, isn't this mainly a domestic focused program, public service? Most schools have an international affairs degree or they have a global studies degree. We don't. President Clinton wanted each and every graduate to have a global lens within their toolkit, even if they never left Arkansas ever again after their international public service project. So Rodrigo, I want to turn to you and talk through how this global lens within your public service toolkit has affected your work. You're at Commerce right now. You're working at something mainly focusing on domestic issues, but walk us through the training you received here as well as during your time with Vital Voices.
So, of course, one of the best experiences here at the Clinton School, and I think that most graduates would agree with, it's the International Public Service Project that we do in between the two-year program. And it really gives you a lens into seeing public service and society and all these issues that affect communities from different perspective, and realize, you know, how fortunate we are here in the United States to have so much access to opportunities that maybe in other countries it's not as available to everyone. For example, I did a project in Sri Lanka focused on improving access to education for the next decade. And when I started doing my research, I realized like not every student in Sri Lanka had access to get an education that allowed them to reach their full potential in the future. And being able to get studies from our country to share with them and implement as best practices to, you know, give these opportunities to students was definitely a rewarding experience. And it really opens the lens as the importance of being a leader on the world stage and ensuring that opportunities that are available here are open to folks around the world. When I did my project with Vital Voices, I interviewed a group of women leaders in Honduras. And their focus area was addressing gender-based violence, which was increasing throughout the pandemic drastically. You know, the numbers were out of this world. And they always mention, you know, we did not have these resources in Honduras until Vital Voices came in. And they shared their best practices on how to address gender-based violence and what we could do to try to, you know, bring these numbers down. And one of the women talked to me about how they pushed something that's now law in the city of San Pedro Sula in Honduras, to criminalize sexual harassment on the streets. And which pretty much means that if a woman is walking at night and a man says something or just some derogatory remark, that man can be prosecuted. And they were able to pass a law through the municipality thanks to the resources that they received from Vital Voices, the mentorship and all the research that comes behind that. So I think that's where the impact of the global aspect of, you know, thinking outside the box and outside your own comfort zone comes in, because it's vital to ensuring that women and everyone in our societies can succeed and bring about change.
It's how do you make impact here in Uganda, in Honduras? There's that common denominator. There's the organization, there's a leadership journey. Quickly, because I want to pivot to the future, because that's really where the exciting stuff is. We've laid an incredible base. Now it's looking forward. For you, Ophelia, talk to me about that toolkit layered in with the global experience.
I think that also comes to me through my experience with Vital Voices, because I did my IPSV and capstone both with Vital Voices. And in both cases, I had the opportunity to interview women from all over the world. When I say all over the world, I mean Africa, Australia, just all the continents that you can think of. I think I interviewed a woman from every continent, and just they sharing their experiences about their work and the impact that they are making in their communities. Even though I was not there physically to see those things, I learned a lot from those things that they shared with me, those stories that they shared with me. And even till date, I am still in touch with some of these women. I actually got the opportunity to interview the former Prime Minister of Peru during my capstone, and she was talking to me about her parliamentarian bid, her presidential bid, and all the policies that she implemented in Peru. And even though I'm not from Peru, I feel like I know a lot about lawmaking and policy making in Peru just because I had that conversation with her and she shared those experiences with me.
This is incredible, Ophelia. And I know over here we have two current students who, one of them is going to be doing their IPSP with Vital Voices this summer, and Daniela is going to be doing her capstone. You're ahead of the game. You've already decided on your capstone. So we know we're going to keep doing good work. We know that. But Alyse, what do you envision? Magic wand. What does the next... We're blue sky in here. What do the next 10 years look like? And if I could use as a peg, I know that you have recently established a data and technology shop. So you're doubling down on the power of data and the power of measurement. So talk to us about what the next 10 year looks like.
Oh boy, that's so exciting.
In 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, in 2.5 minutes. Okay. Well, first off, yes, we've really invested a lot in technology and data, and we've taken our tech team and combined it with our monitoring, evaluation, impact team, because we know that getting our data right is critical to telling the story of impact, right? I can tell you stories until the cows come home of impact, right? But I need to have the data as well, right? To go with it, not just the stories. And what I would love to do, like big vision, and this is what I've been talking to our head of tech and data about, is we have a community hub at Vital Voices. It's new, but I would love for every woman to be able to go into that community hub and have her leadership dashboard. And that leadership dashboard would enable her to see her journey, enable her to see what interventions had an impact. This is exactly what the contribution mapping research does, is it looks at the journey. It looks at where Vital Voices supported her, where the impact was, where other organizations potentially supported her. This is all things we need to learn from. It's not only important that we have this information for donors and to know that, in our hearts, okay, we're having real impact here. It's really important for these women. Because as you can imagine, it is extremely hard and extremely lonely to be a woman out creating change, speaking truth to power, being attacked online, offline, right? You need to know you're having impact to give you the confidence, right? I have no doubt when they did these interviews and this research, these women were like, oh yeah, I never thought about that I have had that impact. And again, it's back to what I said earlier. When we're doing this work, we're tunnel vision. And it's so important to pull back, and celebrate the successes and quantify it, And I think, ultimately that's the vision, that every single one of those 20,000 and growing women could see this dashboard, use it for their own purposes, but also just know they're having an impact. And can you imagine that? Our big goal for 2030 is to show how collectively our network is impacting the lives of 1 billion people. People look at me and say, Alyse, you're crazy. And I'm like, I'm not. In fact, if we could get this data right, they may already be doing that. We may be able to surpass that. And it's not about us and what we've done directly. Again, it's about the network of leaders. That's the big vision. It's big. 1 billion. 1 billion. Yeah, just a billion.
Just 1 billion. So I think I want to open it up to questions. But before I do, quick check-in with Ophelia and Rodrigo. Like I said, we have students who are going to be starting work with Vital Voices, and then future students who will as well. What are pro tips, things to keep in mind in terms of delving into this work that is meaningful, but it's also very hard. The work that you are doing is difficult, both methodologically, but also emotionally. So what are some words of wisdom now as the elder Clinton School alumni that you can share?
There we go. Take your classes seriously. I think all the classes that I took, I don't want to even start naming names because I don't want to forget any class. But every single class that I took, from program planning to communications, to field research methods, to philanthropy, all of them had an impact in my work at Vital Voices because I was already grounded in research. And so when I was doing that, I already was taught by Dr. Driver about methodologies for research. So I knew how to conduct interviews, So take your classes seriously. And secondly, as Dean Soto stated when we started, know your why. I think that your why is what pushes you, is what ignites your passion, and ultimately is what allows you to make an impact. Yes.
And for those of you in the home stretch of the semester, yes, those are good words to hear from Ophelia. Last push, guys, come on. Rodrigo.
I would add that, to current students, to don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask questions. The Clinton School is full of resources. I was impressed at the network that we're connected to and the endless opportunities that are out there after graduation. So yes, talk to your professors, engage with them, have coffee with them, and ask them, how, if you have a goal in mind, how do I accomplish that? What can the Clinton School help me with in achieving my goal? And as Sophia mentioned, know your why, know why you're in public service. What comes to mind is one of the first classes, the courses is Foundations in Public Service. And literally the first assignment is to write your definition of public service in one or two sentences. And Dean DePippa was like, every other week, I'm gonna ask you to update it and to see if you have any changes. And are you writing? To me, it's using the knowledge, resources, and tools that you gain throughout your life to ensure that other people have access to opportunities that reach their full potential. And I think that's rooted in the Clinton School's foundation, mission to give everyone opportunities to succeed and practice noble public service, which is, the vision that President Clinton had when he founded this school. And I'm glad to see the amazing work that Dean Soto has been doing to keep that going.
As President Clinton would say, you want to leave things better off when you leave than when you arrive. And as we transition to the Q&A portion, I just want to underscore the part about community. The Clinton School is a community long after you graduate. Vital Voices is about a global community. It's about the intersection of communities. It's about the power of communities. And even though there are moments where we all feel alone in our different journeys, we lean back on our communities. And that's what allows us to keep going. So with that, questions. I can be a teacher and just start randomly calling on people too.
Hi, Molly Henniger. I was a McLarty Scholar in 2017. And my question is related to that. Rodrigo and Ophelia, you could talk about, and Alyse too, how the longevity of this partnership between Vital Voices and the Clinton School contributed to the robustness of the research.
I will add that when we started as Vital Voices McLarty scholars during very unprecedented times in the middle of a pandemic, being able to go back to previous McLarty scholars, for example, us, we have Michael who's here, and Nikki, who were the two before us, and be like, hey, like, where did you leave off in your research? So we can, go from there, was definitely useful. And again, the Clinton School has this community of where people stay in touch, and that was really useful in our research because we were able to, go back to what others have been doing and build on from there. Ophelia and I would get on the phone like at 2 a.m, like, oh my God, like, what are we missing? Like, we need to get this done and all that. But overall, I mean, I think that the partnership was really well structured. And I hope it, it keeps going because, there's still a lot of work to be done with Vital Voices. So.
And Molly, thank you for highlighting that, because really what was published was the culmination of 10 worth of work. It wasn't 9 months worth of work. They put it together and then they sent it off for publication. It was the culmination of years of work. And that's really what knowledge production is, right? It is building upon the research findings, the field work of folks who came before you. And what this journal article does is it presents that body of work of the 10 years of partnership between Vital Voices and the Clinton School. And where is it? Over here. We have a picture of a number of the McLarty scholars. I know some are joining us online virtually, so hello to our McLarty scholars abroad. Also, many of them are here. We had a recent reunion in Washington, D.C. last year, which was lovely. And if I could speak to the community piece of the McLarty scholars themselves. So each institution has a very strong community, but then within that, the McLarty scholars also has a very special identity and community that persists long after the work is done.
About the present and future kind of strategy. So as I'm sitting here and I'm framing a question in my head and thinking about women's issues around the globe are very place-based and very different. Same time here domestically, we're living in a time where we're seeing rights stripped away from a segment of a population, and just so happens to be a female segment of our population. And so this larger network that y'all have established over these years, are there conversations amongst your global partners about strategies that we need now to be implementing here domestically to combat what is not just a present, but is going to be a future battle from originally what probably would have seemed like a country that this wouldn't be happening, but it's now happening to us. I'm just curious. Would love to learn more about the response, but how domestically are your global partners responding to what's happening to women here?
Thank you. Well, interestingly enough, when Vital Voices was founded, we did not work in the United States. Now, the reason why we didn't work in the United States is because we were founded out of the U.S. State Department. And the U.S. State Department is not about, it's foreign affairs, right? And so it was supporting women around the world. And I think about 10 years into being a nonprofit, we really discovered that was kind of crazy because, it's not like we in the United States or in Canada somehow have it all figured out, right? We certainly don't, and now we really don't. The other thing that I'll say is, and that's been amazing because one of the things that I have seen that I didn't anticipate is that women in the United States don't have a lot of access to global networks of women. And one of the things that we saw is just how powerful that was. And we did some research maybe about 10 years ago when we first started to work with women in the United States. But we did this globally, and it looked at what is the impact of having a global network that is diverse, non-hierarchical, and uncompetitive. And what we found is that it's absolutely essential to taking risk. if you don't have people around you who say you can do it, okay, now your husband might be like, maybe not. Your best friend might be like, well, I've known you since you were 12. And, I mean, really, right? But this woman from, miles and miles away in a totally different culture who maybe is doing something similar is like, yeah, you can run for president, And I have been there at the tables where a woman decides to run for president and she says it for the first time. She's been thinking it. And this whole table of women start the campaign, right? And like, how can we help you? And who do we connect you with? And so it's very, very powerful. And we were worried when we first brought American women into the mix. Would they value that? Would that be important? Would they see that they could learn? Hands down. It has been transformative for many of them. And they've utilized the network also to expand their work globally, which has been incredible, and also take lessons learned. The other thing that I just want to say is that the Beijing Fourth World Conference on Women was the last of those UN conferences. There has not been a Fifth World Conference. There should be, but there hasn't been. Why? Because the document signed, the Platform for Action to Improve the Lives of Women in 12 Critical Areas, is today the most progressive, globally recognized document that 189 countries have signed on to for women. If we opened it back up with a Fifth World Conference, what we would have would backslide tremendously. That is why we can't have another conference. They're also very expensive. But the other piece is why? Why is that happening? My belief, and it might be controversial, is that women's power is on display. Unlike nearly 30 years ago when that conference happened, we couldn't, open up social media and technology and see women's power on display. And that scares people. And I think one of the things that we're trying to put out into the world and bring more men into the mix is to say, this is not a zero-sum game. This is win-win, empowering women. This is about utilizing the full potential, the full energy, the natural resources of your country and your community. And so there's some work to do to communicate that. And certainly in this country, I could go on and on, but I'm seeing, anyway, thank you for the question. It's really important.
Thank you, Alyse. We have time for one more question. Yes. I'm going to bring the mic to you.
Thank you. First I want to say I'm so thankful that whoever used that word messy, that is such an important word, because it calls on us to relax and have some real patience with ambiguity and working things out. So I appreciate that. My question, working in all these countries with all the cultures, we might come to it as Americans in particular with our idea of what data is. And in many other countries and other cultures, data might mean something else. So I'm wondering, what have you learned in terms of respecting, including the way other people collect and use data, as opposed to the real sterilized way? We say things, bring data unless you're God, that kind of thing. And I've always thought that was very restrictive, just learning about how other people think about data.
Yeah, I want to add to that. When I was interviewing these women in Honduras, most of the data that they had collected, was literally on pieces of paper. They were just writing notes and tallying up one of the organizations that I interviewed was tracking cases of HIV/AIDS in Honduras in the transgender community, and they were trying to find programs to, promote HIV/AIDS education. And the way they were tracking that was literally with pen and pencil and paper. And so lack of access to broadband, to internet is crucial in these countries as well, to be able to, just access Google Scholar, for example, or to just look up research on the internet. So, I mean, you're right. It's definitely challenging, and that's where there's these partnerships of like Vital Voices that goes into these countries and provides them with resources and mentorship on best practices to to be able to create impact with the resources that you have is, vital, for them.
I think I'll speak very briefly on that, but from my, I guess, my research perspective as a PhD student, I am very interested in women in work, and I'm interested in that on the African continent. And very recently, I was doing a research on informal work in Ghana, and I was looking at the case of street hawking in Ghana. And I realized that the informal sector on the African continent contributes over 50% to the GDP. There's no, the work that women do, and because of the lack of data, most of these women do not even have any worker protections. And as I was doing that research, I was thinking about how if there was data, that proved how much women contribute to this informal sector, it could drive something, right? And in my PhD program, though it sounds like it's a lot of reading and policy work, it's actually a lot of using data to make informed decision. And in that space, I see how much work that is being done just because there's data that backs, the research. So that is such a brilliant question, honestly. And it just showcases that our world, even as our world is moving to such a digital space, like data is so essential in every aspect and in every sphere.
The power of multiple methodologies, because depending on the context, you're going to have to cater that. As we close out, I want to thank all of you for joining us for this very special conversation, honoring the work of the Clinton School of Public Service and Vital Voices over the past 10 years, celebrating what we've done, looking forward to what we're going to do, the impact. I also want to recognize the space that we're in, the Clinton Presidential Center. My colleague, Stephanie Street, director of the Clinton Foundation, right upstairs, Dr. Alita Black, who joined us, and all of you for furthering public service in each of your unique journeys. Thank you. We saved the best for last. We're going to have closing remarks from Donna McLarty.
Well, now you can sort of see what we've been excited about all this time. I want to thank each of you for being here. Vital Voices and it encompasses working with the Clinton School. It's the counterpoint to the nightly news. It's wonderful things going forward. It's hopeful. It's positive. It's collaborative. It's real. It has bulk. And so I appreciate each of you for being here, for being interested in this work. And my mother always used to say, Donna, you spend all this time on Vital Voices, but no one in Little Rock knows what it is. So now you know, and you are the ambassadors for this. I have notes even for very brief closing remarks at the encouragement of Dean Skip Rutherford, because I can get off topic and go down deep rabbit holes on Vital Voices very, very easily. So I'm trying to stay edited. I could, for example, say, 30 years ago, this group of women at the Montevideo airport chased us to the gate to tell us that we couldn't leave. They needed solidarity and training and a nonprofit organization. All true. It's like we've often said, and see, I'm doing it already. I'm way off script. It's like we caught a wave. This work was going to happen. The women wanted it to happen, kind of the world karma wanted it to happen. And we were just really, any of us involved, and there are 1,000 mothers and fathers to this work. It swept you along. And it's been an extraordinary experience. I met Alyse when she was 20, 21. There's a story there too about her going to Beijing, but that is another story. So I want to say thank you to each of you, Vicki, Alyse, Rodrigo, Ophelia, Al, for your really outstanding presentations. And the elevator pitch for Vital Voices still, after all this time, eludes me. I cannot give a sense of what it is briefly. So I think today has been very helpful of giving you a sense of really the power of it and the soul of it and the individuals and that connectivity that we all feel. So thanks to each of you for that. And I think you can probably see why Vital Voices has been a real joy to me and to my family during all this time. Our son Franklin was here earlier, and he served on the board of the Voices of Solidarity, which is a group of men that was formed, at least 10 plus years ago, to support the work of women. It was not just about women. It's men too, and community. And so I was pleased that he could be here. The McLarty Scholars Partnership with Vital Voices in the Clinton School really began with the pilot project that Al Bavon led to Ghana. And it included, Skip, about 25 students, and there were faculty from the Walton College in Walton College of Business in Fayetteville and the Fulbright College of Arts and Sciences. And there's a picture of that group at the bottom of the photos over there. But and this group also later worked at the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. But that was the beginning in 2012. And the partnership has expanded and grown and edited itself and taken shape since then, since 2014, and has developed into the model that we're using now, where 2 students go annually from the Clinton School as fellows to Vital Voices. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're brainstorming, right? Particularly when you're around the proverbial kitchen table. But that's exactly what happened with Skip and Mac and I as we sat around to think about what might happen if you paired Clinton School students with Vital Voices experiences. It had meant so much for me to be from here and then experience all that Vital Voices encompassed. So it's like, so how do you share that? How do you pass that forward? So that's where this has all grown from. And the uniqueness of the program has centered around each cohort, building on the students' research of the previous year, as they've noted. And Alyse, you and the team have been great mentors to those students, which I know they will all attest. And then here too with the staff, Susan Hopper and I saw her earlier, there. Susan was just a stalwart here to work with the Vital Voices team to give the students who were just stepping out on their own for this work, and it was new and fresh and therefore unformed to a degree. So thank you for making it real. And it's exciting to be here today to really celebrate the publication of this research. That's a real milestone. And I just sort of couldn't resist having something tangible to present. So the research is in here. It's a pamphlet. And I wanted it to seem substantial because it is substantial. So, Vicki, this is so that the research will have physical presence in the library, wherever you want it, and then it will be used in written form or digitally. So, thank you. Washington in May at Vital Voices. So thank each of you for being here. It really means the world, and it's very encouraging. Please take a look at the pictures of all the McLarty scholars that are on the board over here. You can just see the positive energy flowing off of those pictures. And then the scholars who are here, can you stand real quickly so people can locate you and have a conversation afterwards? And so we'll say, to be continued, right?